Haha, finally works. This is the nephew observability meetings on March 12th, 2024.
Hold on, wait a minute. I'm gonna get the manual level.
All right. Anyone has anything? Because again, I still have not have an agenda doc, I guess. So anyone has anything to talk about?
I mean, I can start if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
There was a task in which I've asked you basically a comment for what do we need logs for? And I
Mhm.
just wanted to say that we have internally in Orange basically deployed a small demo with auto collector in a daemon set form. It's nothing too sophisticated, but we got it to basically get all 35GC related logs and get them to a Prometheus exporter. And so now my question is, do we have any details as to what do we actually need in the data lake for an example for the POC that you've mentioned last week?
That's actually a very good question. So let's it's actually less ambitious than you probably think it is. But let's get let me share something. Um, Actually, I should share that with like everybody. Um, so I mean, I think last week we were talking about well, I mean, just you and me basically, starting to look into you and me, meaning me and Marcin, looking into building off a POC. Well, it's a phase one of the POC, so in a very very quick and dirty, and see how it goes. Um, so the idea, so finally writing this thing out, um, the idea would be, this is actually the real diagram. Um, the idea is, in a UPF, I I'm open to whatever you're using, but then I think you folks have been talking about using BPF. So with BPF, you are loading metrics or events into a collectors, and then somehow from the collectors, as well as the Kubernetes specific infrastructure related metrics and data, um, we would be able to export it to well, actually going this way, actually. Um, we'll be exporting it to through the collectors into whoever wants to subscribe to it, which in our case is basically the network function operators. So this is basically all I'm expecting, if anything at all. I mean, as a community, hopefully we can agree. But then that's basically our phase one, which is let's take the data out, and then someone in the workload clusters can basically subscribe, or able to fetch it. I mean, subscribe is a word that I keep on using. But then if you examine, I'm not sure if the subscription exporters in the collector at this point. And this only pertains to the workload clusters for initial phase. Um, the idea. The idea
All
is,
right.
yeah. So
Well,
you asked a lock question, so I didn't actually even expect the lock to be a thing. So we haven't had any. I mean, phase one is not a lot of contributors. So we are not having anyone pencil in to do the data lake. We could do besides the fundamental infrastructure of sending data from the workload clusters back to the management cluster is something that we haven't actually really figured out, because it seems like SIG security has a proposal on how the identity, the user, the identity of the pods and services, um, that would be that could be used to see whether or not you can actually write something back. It seems like they have an idea what to do, and it would be great to leverage. Um, Although whether or not that would pertain to our infrastructure, whether or not they would provide a centralized proxy or something to be collecting. It doesn't seem like there was a final solution there yet. So at this point, if we phase one meaning hopefully quick and dirty, we'll be focusing a lot more on just workload clusters, getting informations that we want. So I think that is actually the biggest question, whether or not what is the informations that we want. For UPF so the first thing would be the throughput, just the throughput informations of the uplink and downlink of the of your UPF, which in that case would be N3 and N6, right? But then it's different directions of N3 and N6. So the ingress of an N3 or a down would be an ingress of an N6, would be a good starting point. So again, it's not like we're not doing in-depth stuff yet. I'm pretty sure the orange work that you guys do internally is a lot more sophisticated, and then it would be great to gradually able to see those being contributed to the community or being exposed, hopefully exposed by or opened by Orange, and then we see whether we can leverage it on our infrastructure. But then at this point, one path that I would like to take a look at would be the operators able to get the information that they want to kind of validate that against the intent through the observability path. So that's basically all I want. Log, I think you asked about log. I was asking for log, I think, all this time, and then the idea is obviously because logs are useful. We did our one basically in terms of making a call and everything is based purely on log information. There's really nothing else we grab out of this. So we'll like to have that on the data lake. On phase one, in terms of this particular use case, we probably don't need logs yet. So that would be so if you were able to get the logs, and where do you collect them? I guess you collect them on Fluentd.
Yeah, so the thing that I wanted to point in this diagram is that well, I don't think that there is a data persistency element.
In
Yeah,
the
so
workload clusters at this point, I know Pietro presented something where the backend collectors also exist on workload clusters. I'm open to that. I just want to know what the use case really is, and if the applications, quote unquote applications, at this point can directly stream the data into the applications. So in this case, I said application would be basically just the operator, just the NF operator. Then that would be a great use case without actually having backend stores on workload clusters. Yeah, go ahead, Pietro.
Hi. So the question is how precisely I would like to describe the use case, because the use case where the operator is using the metrics for the life cycle, it's a very generic use case, but still it's the use case. If you would like to fetch all the data from the management, it will be not scalable in the large scale from my point of view. So isn't that use case for you, the usage of the data by the operator itself?
But then the idea would, I mean, I understand the sentiment. I just wonder, given that our data lake lives on somewhere, management cluster for now, the idea would be all raw data would be centrally collected on the data lake. So in your thinking, that would be a backing store in the workload clusters, and then we don't actually stream anything to the management clusters, unless maybe just summarizations or something. Is that part of the idea?
one part of the idea to keep some data locally, of course, is the scalability. And the second part is it's even it's something what was discussed on other SIGs, let's say, or in the SIG automation, that you have different closed loops, and some closed loop are really close to the user or to the place where the network function is living, that you need the data immediately. And if you would like to pull the data from the management, of course, I don't want to give you the specific use case. Those discussions were present that you may want to use the data in real time. Other aspects are definitely the security aspects. Why would you like to fetch the data from some remote place if you can stay locally? It will definitely increase the security and maybe much more. Maybe not use cases, but reasons why you would like to put the data locally.
So storing data has a couple of uses of storing data. One of them is because you're storing data on all historic data as a store. So you can run analyses on top of stored data, even with a history, with entire history. I don't know if I expect full and analytics to be running on the workload clusters. Again, we're observabilities. We don't actually dictate that anyway. But then the framework that we're providing, whether or not we would like applications that needs to fetch historic data to do an analysis, to run across all workload clusters to fetch data and consolidate them before they would actually run analytics. I'm not sure whether or not this is something that would be done by whatever the application is that would be running analysis. I am okay with some level of the security aspects, I guess, because the idea is the workload cluster is accessible by users directly, so you can config. But then the data lake is also access controlled. I think that was the idea. So you have a central place where it would basically carry over your identity, and then understanding whether or not you have the privilege to actually access the data. I mean, I'm not objecting to it. At this point, we would have to run basically full bloom collectors on all the workload clusters, and it changes the work a little bit, I guess, because at that point, the applications, the NF operators in this case would have the ability to just fetch directly from the backing store direct collectors, which I may or may not be a good thing. You would replicate the client logic, I guess, across all of them. But then the good thing is you can make more complicated queries. Yeah, but I still don't know what's the use of storing all the historic data on the workload clusters directly.
So one command is to do not store historic data. I mean, the data which will live on the workload supposed to be ephemeral. It should live for a short period of time. But I get your point. I mean, this is just the proposition. I'm not saying it's the best one.
Go ahead, Vim.
Yeah, so I'm also of the opinion that on the workload cluster we should not store for long periods of time. Now so what you typically want potentially is depending on what you want to do, you probably want to store a few snapshots of the, let's say, the last 10 or the last 20 results that you get, because sometimes you don't want to react quickly, right? So you want to do some hysteresis before you actually do something, right? But so I don't think you need to persist the data, because what you typically, and in my view, that's also let's say, the collector, if you will, or whatever you call it in the middle, right? So is actually should actually perform this job, right? Because these are very, let's say, generic function. Because what you sometimes have is you say, okay, I want to react if you see 10 events of the last 10 or 20 items or something like that, so you do some more correlated actions. So, and I believe that the job of the workload cluster is basically to act fast, right? So you basically want to act and locally without having a dependency, because it's also more scalable typically.
Right.
So as such, I think persistency on the workload cluster is, in my view, less important than it is on the management cluster, because in the management cluster, you probably want to aggregate the data and use it for visibility, right?
Yeah.
Now, I have one comment on the picture that you present here, is that
nice
the arrow to the NF operator, right? So I believe that the operator is going to be split in multiple components.
Okay.
Because I look at it, what we are discussing with service assurance, right? So you probably have, take for example, your use case of load, right? So I want to do something based on the load. There is a generic function. If you look at KDA right now, you basically have it point to some metrics that you scrape, and it will basically auto scale for you automatically with custom metrics. In other words, there is a generic function that lives in the workload cluster for which we don't have to, we just have to configure it properly, but we don't have to write any code.
Right.
Right. So in other words, what I'm trying to say
so
is that
the reaction part is right. So that the operator
no, even that. So the way I see it is the following. So we have a set of configuration pieces, right? Those will be configured somehow, but you actually delegate the authority of the configuration snippet to a certain entity, right? So in other words, he is going to be the responsible to actually manage the lifecycle of that value, if you will, right? So let's make it easy. Value is replicas, right? There's going to be an entity that's going to manage replicas, right? And that's not necessarily one big operator. We have to basically split it into pieces, in my view, in order to make it scalable. And as a result, what you do is you see that you will have various functions that do each individual things that manage that particular value or a set of values, right? So it could be more than one, right? But can also be config, right? So for example, right now we are mainly focused on infra, but we don't have a capability to basically, I think Saga is putting something with SSH for the PBS or use case, right? So where you can change the value of the configuration. So I'm of the opinion that you have a set of, let's call them actors in the sense of service assurance that is going to use the data and act upon that particular configuration snippet and manage that. So, and they are the responsibility to control the lifecycle, and they will be bootstrapped, for example, by the operator to say, okay, here is your min and max value you can use, right? But the authority or the dynamic change is going to be controlled by these guys.
Yeah. So yeah, not so yes. The NF operator is not the one doing all kinds of stuff. I think you're thinking way ahead of me already. So on phase one, I just want to take enough information so I can actually set the status. That's all.
The status of what?
The status of
NF
NF deployment, basically. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's probably a role of the NF operator, right?
Yeah. So at that point, if let's say your UPF, your IO is basically CPU bound. or the throughput is actually CPU bound. Then you look at the CPU, you look at CPU informations and the load informations. You say, oh, set a condition saying that, oh, I detected that this is the current setup of my CPU and memory is probably not enough to actually satisfy this particular
yeah, but
intent.
if the CPU and memory is not sufficient, it should be the job of the actor, not potentially the operator. That's where the delegate control of the value is what I'm talking about, right? Do you want one big blob of an operator to control the whole NF? In my view, no.
Okay.
Like setting the status, I'm up. Yes, that is his job. But for example, scaling in and scaling out, you probably will delegate that to someone. There will be someone who is going to do that. At least I don't know whether people have a different opinion, but because then you can basically divide and conquer again, right? So in other words, you can make this very generic if you want. That's like CADA is an implementation that is a very generic assurance. Probably it has constraints, but so there is limitations in what you can do, but you can feed it custom metrics. You can have it act on stuff, right? And so if we think that way, we can basically scale it as well. Because otherwise you have one big monolithic operator that does everything. I don't think that's going to be the way forward.
Okay.
But that's my 2 cents. But
okay.
That's why I would break down NF operator into pieces and have them as individual things that are going to act on stuff.
Right. So with the SDK work, the NF operator will not even be owning the deployment and all the other objects at this point. They are basically just responsible for updating a config map, for example. And the other side would be even for SDK, we haven't actually figured out who's going to write the statuses. I think that's the discussion for tomorrow. And then and I agree that so when we started, the idea would be the NF operator at the very least would be controlling the NF config, the configurations of the network functions. And then so today you can make it down the NF operators there to just listening onto NF deployment and then kind of sending out different tasks to different entities. I mean, there's only one task today, which is sending the Helm input conversions and send it out to a Helm execution engine to take over. But then in here, there's still, because it owns the NF deployment object, it still writes the feedback of the NF deployment object. So it would, whether or not, so yeah, I agree. So if they may not have to be the one that subscribe to the visibility data. So the hotel.
Let's take a concrete use case. Let's say I deploy an NF, right? And let's say the management system says, okay, you want to start up with one replica. Okay, make it easy.
Yeah.
But you configure somewhere that the minimum is 0 and the maximum is 10. Okay. So in other words, NF operator takes the input, probably puts min and max somewhere, right? So makes that value available somewhere in a config map. And then it spins up the deployment with one replica, right?
Yeah.
Then you have, besides that, you have an observability thingy running. It's actually a little bit of an assurance thingy in my view, but they are mixed, which is monitoring the load, right? So let's say monitoring the load, okay, that one replica reaches 70% of the load. You want him, in my mind, that observability actor, if you will, right? Or that service assurance actor has the min and max value that he got from the operator initially, and he is now going to act upon the value that he receives. So let's say you reach 70% and you have a threshold at 70%. Okay, I'm going to add another replica too, right?
Right.
So that's how I'm thinking about this this whole thing.
Yeah. So that guy's going to do another replica. So that's one that's one module that would do that. So that guy needs to somehow gets observability data to basically they monitor your CPUs in this case, and then and that would be another. I don't know who it is. The operator.
Now you could. So I mentally how we can think about it. That's why I'm at the moment I'm thinking of the NF operator to split it into pieces. You have the one guy that basically spins up the whole thing, right? And there is another entity within the operator, right? Because an operator can be multiple reconcilers, if you will, right? You could also split it up and make it more generic, right? So you can basically say, I'm going to now build a generic autoscaler, right? Which basically Kubernetes has, right?
Yeah.
So in other words, then it's no longer part of a single NF operator, but kind of the operator delegates that responsibility to that generic thing. But so I think for now, let's reason about it as part of the operator. But you'll see that you can potentially generalize this whole idea if you have if you make it.
True. So last week's SDK we talked about that thing when Kieran was there. They were asking, why do we have to do anything beyond the horizontal autoscaler? And then I was telling him, yeah, sure, you would have to understand your own applications that if you're creating another part of this particular type, perhaps you need another secondary interface, and then therefore you have to fetch another IP address to do so. So that could actually be something also specifically doing that outside of the NF operator or controllers that were sitting the trigger by the NF operators or reacting to some things that would be using. So I'm not saying that we should making the NF operator bigger and bigger and thus everything, all data operations. I think this is specific your ask here because observability is now feeding into more data operations into the operator. Yeah, true. And at this point, for phase one, I don't have much yet, so I'm just sending it back. Just understanding that I would. So one thing I would like to do for phase one in terms of POC perspective is that do we know what this path looks like? So it doesn't matter who this is, but then do we know what this particular path looks like?
But for example, would it not be beneficial, Stephen, to look at KEDA or something like that, which is a generic thing, right? And just use it? Because then you actually can see how it operates. I'm just making KEDA as an example because that's something I know, right? But there might be others. But at least then we have a framework to collect data, right? You put it into a generic thing, and then I know that KEDA has generic metrics where you can subscribe to. And so just setting that complete up would already crystallize a lot of data, I think. Then we can see, okay, is KEDA sufficient? Is it not? And blah, blah, blah. And as such, we can then see and do other things, right? But that would be, in my view, a good proposition. I don't know what other people say. So in other words, you use a generic thing that Kubernetes has, and you use the data that you collect and have it act upon.
And then in this case, KEDA also would be able to subscribe to something off of the OTel interface?
Yeah, so I know that it has an interface to the generic metric server, right? So I don't know. So that whole thing, someone needs to flush out how it would look like. But I know that you can have it like add custom metrics to it. It's like 2-3 years ago that I played with it, so it's a bit I'm rusty on the whole thing. But you can add custom metrics to it.
Okay.
It has probably evolved quite a bit from what I'm talking about. I don't know whether Piotr or Marcin, do you have any experience with it?
First time
No.
that I'm hearing about it, so I don't think so.
Neither me. As you are saying, it's worth checking out.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to see what's the interface, as you said, in terms of what how do they receive this is a good example to use, I guess, in terms of how do they receive um, metrics and observability data, um, and then it may actually kind of drive what kind of things we actually have to link.
See, should I share my screen quickly?
Yeah, go ahead.
Wait. You see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
So here, right? So what they have is the workload. So you have a metric adapter, and then you can basically tie it to autoscaler, right?
Mm-hmm.
So here Kubernetes, so it typically interface with so what I was aware about, so it interacts with the metric server of Kubernetes.
Yeah, so generic CPU memory type inputs.
Yeah, but you can also have custom metrics. So if you go to custom metrics, you can add custom. At least that was custom metrics. See, use custom metrics. They use it on Google Cloud and stuff like that. See, you can basically say name blah 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 blah, and so this depends on your observability thing. So here, so you can add based on a path. It's typically right because it's a JSON entity. So typically you store those metrics even for, let's say, load and throughput and or CPU. You store them using a path, right? And then you basically subscribe to it. So that's how it works. But they have there is lots of data here, right?
Mm-hmm.
See, and then you can add custom metric values, right? With the metric identifier, which is the path, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then an object vector, and then the window. So this is basically some in memory. So here you can actually window what I was trying to say, collect a set of metrics. So you have all of this, yeah. You can have custom metrics, you can have external metrics. So I don't know whether they fully integrate with Prometheus, for example, but I would be surprised if they don't. And there might be others, by the way, yeah? But this is one that I'm aware about.
Mm-hmm.
But they have standard metrics like these. So these are the Kubernetes metrics, right? Mm-hmm. And then, but you have also custom metrics and external metrics even. So and then a typical use case that you see is auto scaling, right? So you basically feed HPA.
Mm-hmm.
So in my view, if we set this up to say we can collect it and we can act, it would be, I think, I mean, a really good demo, not? Right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we can check it out, but I was under the impression that we were not going to go into horizontal scaling since, correct me if I'm wrong, but neither of the currently supported vendors core 5G core implementations even can be scaled horizontally, right?
That becomes a completely different things to do. I mean, in theory for UPF you can hide it under an IUPF.
But I think, Marcin, the whole idea is to actually consume the data somehow. Whether we do auto scaling or not is a different thing, right? So we're just saying, just showing that we have the metrics and we can visualize it and do something with it. Whether we trigger the auto scaler is yet a different thing, right?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we're not having a gigantic scope creep for the POC, since you
Yeah, that's
mentioned
true. Yeah,
a
let's not.
demo with
Yeah, let's not
Kira.
do the free 5GC scaling thing. Now,
So
in here, as I said, I just want to see. It doesn't need to be an operator, but some dummy applications would be able to fetch the data locally in the workload clusters. I think
So for Kira, looking at the architecture, I can see that they have some beta version of integration with the OTel collector. They do have an integration with Prometheus. I don't think they persist the data, just for
No,
like
no,
a
no, no,
first
no,
look,
no, no. For
looking
sure.
at the
No,
architecture.
they would be a service assurance type of thing. So they act upon the data. So their role is basically, I take in any data, right? Of course, there needs to be some standardization. So that's why I would not be surprised that they have OTel support, right? And then they act. So their typical use case, but is the one I'm familiar with is auto scaling, but you can have other stuff. You can do other stuff with it, in my view, right? So you could basically, I don't know what plugins they have, but I'm sure that you can do other. You can basically just send a trap or send a webhook to something or something like that, probably. You see?
Yeah, sure.
And I think just the fact that we succeed in getting it to access the data is, I think, sufficient for us, right? So we don't need to act potentially.
Right. Well, I mean, the idea is to have something that will be able to access that data on the other end.
Yeah.
So it's the A in Kita means auto scaling. So it's just
Here is storage.
like,
I don't know what they do here. Okay, we have to figure it out. I mean, the reason why I'm bringing it up is to avoid reinventing the wheel, because this has been, I mean, these type of projects are focused on these type of things. You see?
No, I don't disagree with that. It's just that we are in our case, actually, we're not necessarily focused on auto scaling.
No. But auto scaling is just one of the use cases that I'm familiar with. They can do many other stuff in my view.
Okay. Yeah, because we are more, I guess, interested in having any applications that runs on workload clusters to be able to fetch metrics or fetch any of the visibility data that they want. So yeah, I mean, the operator is easy for me because I wrote the operator, so I could use it to just see what's the interface looks like. Not that I'm acting upon it. No, that was not the intention.
Yeah, but if you can have I mean, my view is if you have a generic thing that can act, that can look at the data, then we don't have to build it ourselves, right?
Yeah, but then if we only make sure that it works with Kita, then we only ensure that Kita is the only thing that it's the one thing that works, but we're not sure what other interfaces do we actually expose. Are we supposed to, on the OTel interface? Are we, what kind of what is the well? There's a lot of possibility, obviously, on the exporters, but what is the more generic ones where any applications would be able to subscribe to?
Nakash has its hand up.
Yeah, go ahead, Nakash.
Yeah, but my question is, the Kena doesn't look like, is it as an alternative for, this doesn't have data store capability, right? It cannot store, it can collect and trigger maybe scaling, right? I mean, that's what it does. Just trying to understand if the initial discussion was about the storage, and now I'm trying to understand how Keda fits into that.
No. Keda for me and storage are two orthogonal discussions.
Okay.
I was more focused discussing it on the operator itself, right? Is to have a generic capability to actually consume the data rather than do everything in an operator, because most likely, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking a bit about experience myself as well. I mean, for us, inside of Nokia, we use a generic backend. We don't try to reinvent the wheel, by the way, on that side. And so we just consume it through a generic system, and then and that's it.
Okay.
So the storage, this has nothing to do with storage.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So we do want to store it as Piotr said. Then we'll use a OTel supported backend like Prometheus, and have a Prometheus instance running directly on workload clusters, which we're still under discussion at this point on this.
And one more thing, Wim, regarding CADA, Wim, the workload can expose any type of APIs, into the collection system in CADA.
They have what I do. I mean, see, there is various other. I'm just looking. There is other project in this space like this. So here you have a bunch of them, right? So they all do similar things, right? So, but so what they do well, in my view, is generalizing a lot of the things, right? So what you see is that there is I'm always of this thing of you have a pattern, right? A pattern is, okay, I need to collect a metric. I need to see what is the hysteresis about the metric. And based on that, you do something, right? You can generalize this, right? So that's what these type of people try to do.
Right. If it suits, something like logs, because OTel claims, they can collect logs, metrics.
They're not so focused on logs, by the way. So it's more metrics. So really,
this is basically metrics. Yeah.
They are not really focused so much on logs, I believe.
I mean, for auto scalings, it's not like we're still in high intelligence to parse text. They're just numbers coming in. It reaches a particular threshold, do some calculations, and then it reacts by taking some actions. Yeah.
But think about, for example, Yang, right? So let's say in Yang you have a very specific path. So if you build a generic function to say I get this data and I'm acting with this path, right? You can build this very generic. You don't need any specialized code. And that you would supply through a config snippet, right? So say, okay, metric in, this is what you want to do. And then you have you can build very generic stuff. Okay, Piotr, I don't know. Piotr also had the time.
Yeah. So Akash, I guess your hand is stale, right?
Oh, sorry, I'll just allow it.
Yeah, Piotr, go ahead.
Let me ask this question again, probably to you, because I remember a few months ago you presented the concept I'm going to ask you about, and also you have this experience of the vendor. If you'd like to do auto-scaling using some generic solution, how do you see, for example, based on the specific use case that, let's say you have UPF and you have this reference points, right? So if you would like to, the question is, if you would like to scale one specific UPF without creating the new one, I believe you would like to have many pods, but only, let's say, one reference point and free for all the UPFs, or one, maybe better example is one N6 for the UPF. So assume that you have this N6 reference point, and how do you see that each UPF, which is a part of, in fact, one instance of the UPF, will have one N6, or a set of UPFs will need to share the N6 interface?
So normally you will have, they are sharing, so they find the complete N6, because otherwise you will be throughput constrained. I mean,
yes. So is it possible to make auto-scaling out of the box using some generic tool and make sure that this configuration with N6 will be done right?
Yeah, in my view, yes, right? Because auto scaling, by the way, is not probably going to be determined by a single metric, but a collection of them, right? So it's the result of multiple that basically result into a set of action. But so if you think about it, right? Let's say you have a set of metrics, and of course, the logic to determine to scale or not to scale, right, is a bit more complicated than a single value that I was presenting before. But at the end of the day, it is math, right? And you can say that every metric has a certain weight in the decision, and based on that, you can build an action, right? So that's if you build specific code, that's what you do, right? So in other words, you could say, in order to determine the auto-scale action, this is the data that I want, and based on that data, here is an algorithm that I'm using to take an action.
And how do you see, let's say, the communication from the SMF to the UPF? If the operator is aware about the scaling part, you probably know that you should send the data in some way. But if you put this, if you give this responsibility for the external entity, how do you manage that to make sure that
ideally, which is not the case today for Free5GC, but in general, what happens is you auto-discover the new entity in the system, and it will auto-adjust its load distribution, right?
You mean via NRF?
Yes, yeah. That would be the way typically to do it, yeah.
The question from my point of view is as follows. If this set of UPFs, let's say, it's one NF, or it will be locked as a multiple NFs in the NRF, because if you assume single set of reference points, then it's probably some black box where you have the spots, which are theoretically one instance, and in practice there are multiple instances. But then you can run another UPF, which again, it's a single instance, but it can have many pods inside this black box.
My view, Piotr, is that although you have similar instances, you still need to have an identifier that says this, let's say, pod belongs to this instance, right? Because you manage typically a site, right, as a whole. So both indexes are important, right?
Okay, so you say that each replica, even though it's really ephemeral, you will need to go through the registration via the NRF, because as we know, the pods are dying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ideally, both identifiers are important in my view. And yeah, depending on how you consume the system, but you should have access to both, and then you can do whatever you want.
Okay,
now we are
So I mean, this is for this particular case, Free5GC works probably as more of a special case than commercial network functions. I did work with network functions where UPF by itself is a lot of pods, and then when you auto scale, they auto scale only one type of pods. So this is technically still one single UPF instance. Whereas in Free5GC I can't do that. If I do scale up UPF, then there has to be a lot of UPFs that all get registered with NRF with different endpoints, because they're all going to have an N4 at that point.
But we are a bit digressing, I think. So the question is,
I think we are too.
So maybe you should take the screen again. But the question is, do we build something ourselves in the operator, or do we leverage something that is available, right? I think that's where...
I don't disagree with that. It's just that as a framework, we should understand what the interface is, though. So how do we get metrics out of our framework? So now we use OTel. We use OTel collectors, and there are different types of exporters. that we can use. I mean, obviously, we also don't want to dictate what kind of exporter we use. But then what we do in POC and what we probably doing on releases are reference implementations. And the reference implementations, it shows we can support exporter XYZ, and then we have reference applications that we write that are taking this kind of way. So if it goes from Pre5GC to a vendor X operator, a vendor X network functions operator plus whatever things that they're using, then they could follow the reference and see how they would be able to get data off of our framework.
Yeah, my only proposal was to use KEDA as a to look at it, because they have a standardized way to get data out of a metric system, right? So it's probably useful for us to actually have a look at how they do it. Whether you use the implementation or not doesn't really matter, but at least you see, because this is a space that has been people focused on this space, right? So it's we should not reinvent the wheel.
I agree. So we shouldn't be it would be bad if our framework is in such a way that KEDA wouldn't be able to get anything out of us. that would be pretty terrible. That I agree with. That's why we are merging.
But also the way they collect the data, right? So I was looking at that's been a while. But for example, the way they have a CRD basically to get metrics out of the system and to subscribe, right? So that type of thing is also useful.
Okay. No, so that's worth examining. Yeah. Because at this
not
point,
just
at this point, I think that was discussed like 2 or 3 meetings ago. How would any type of applications would or any NF would be able to dare to describe what informations they want to get out of the systems and what is the thing they want to subscribe to. Do we tag different metrics from different vendors under like some sort of topic or categories where they can actually do, or if there's some way that they're doing it on something like KEDA, that's worth examining, because that's definitely not something we have decided yet.
Here integrating with OpenTab.
There.
Yeah, you see, so it's like you get all of the stuff out of the box, right? So that's why I'm saying that's integrate with Prometheus, right? See, you get all of that stuff out of the thing, right? You don't need to do much for it. Plus, you see how they are consuming it, right? Okay, yeah. Sorry. See, these are all the stuff that they already have, right?
No, so that's good. So they already have some integrations that could be our target application to get metrics from. So we want to make sure that what we pumped could be received.
Okay, I'll shut up.
Okay. Yeah, okay, 3 minutes left. Anyway, so I'm gonna share the doc. I guess there's some updates that we will probably do, but we'll target for a phase 1 POC off of basically just workload clusters for now, and then with Pre5GC, just one network functions now, UPF for now. So we know for sure that it emits 0 metrics. So we'll have to create some things to send some metrics out, set up an OTel collectors, examine the receivers, and the existing receivers, processors, and exporters, and see which one we used, and then we have to have a test application receive it, and then as Wim said, maybe KEDA is something that it seems like a good candidate to use because they already they already have an hotel integrations, and then we can, if we can get that framework down, that would be good step one. So, any objections? I'm going to share the doc, so anyone make everybody able to edit it too, so we can have some sort of goal on seeing what we want to build for phase one, for the POC, and then if that looks good, then we can probably have a way better look into the release scope. We can start looking into what's on management clusters, data lake, there are other frameworks and things that needs to come in before we send something into the management cluster. But then for now, let's tackle the workload cluster side. So if we have any workload cluster applications, we'll be able to expose visibility data to that app. Okay, sounds good. Yeah, so far the only volunteer is me and Marcin. So hopefully more people would be interested as we go. So that's okay. So I'll share the doc, and then we'll kind of narrow down the scope, and then get that one quick iterations of the phase one POC going. Okay.
Sure.
Sure thing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. If nothing else, then we have time. So thank you.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.